One November evening in 1987 at King's Cross, a thin ribbon of smoke curled up through the oak slats of the down escalator and hung in the bright ticket hall like a question. Commuters drifted past with newspapers under their arms, thinking of tea and warm flats. A porter leaned over the handrail and saw a glow deep in the machinery, down beneath the moving steps where grime and paper scraps collected. He rang it in, calm voice, small problem. On railways, you learn to normalize interruptions. A tiny flame under an escalator did not look like an emergency. Staff fetched hand extinguishers. A radio crackled. Someone went for a standpipe key. The fire burned stubbornly out of reach, nibbling along grease that had built up over decades. Smoke pooled in the escalator well and began to feel its way upward along the wooden trench. Down on the platforms, passengers stepped off into a haze and thought it was just brake dust. London Fire Brigade swung into Euston Road just after 7:30. Crews jogged through the concourse with that practiced steadiness that keeps crowds moving. They were led to the escalators, saw the orange shine, and began to set lines. Heat licked the underside of the moving stairs like a fuse burning inside a wooden gutter. An officer ordered the power shut off. The chain clanked to a halt. Firefighters knelt at the footway with branches ready, but the heart of the blaze sat up under the slats where water and powder could not quite reach. No one on scene yet understood the shape of the thing they were fighting. An escalator is a long box tipped on its side, timber treads, timber skirting, a canopy that traps hot gases as they race uphill. Air followed the fire pulled more air. The incline worked like a wind tunnel. Engineers would later give it a name, the trench effect, but at that moment, the blaze was only a sound, a coarse breathing getting quicker and nearer. In the ticket hall, the first pulsing wave of smoke arrived, and people finally looked up. Staff tried to shut shutters and point passengers toward other exits. Trains, unhelpfully punctual, kept delivering new crowds. The evacuation plan existed on paper, but habit is stubborn. Keep London moving, deal with the nuisance, reopen. Radios were patchy, training uneven, and the assumption that a small fire would remain small hung in the air as surely as the smoke. Down by the escalator pit, temperature leapt. The fire sprinted up the incline in a single racing front, hit the lip of the ticket hall, and in an instant rolled across the ceiling. It was a blowtorch turned into weather. Lights burst. Acrid black smoke slammed flat, then curled downward, choking anyone who tried to run through it. People stumbled as if tripped by an invisible wire and disappeared in the murk. A firefighter shouted a mayday as the heat shoved him back like a hand on the chest. Outside on Euston Road, drivers saw flame burst from the station mouth as if a furnace door had been kicked open. Police pushed the crowd back. Ambulance crews laid out stretchers in rows. Firefighters divided the job the way they always do: search, water, breathing apparatus, command. There is a discipline to their work even when the air is roaring. But inside the hall, the conditions outpaced the plan, and seconds did what minutes could not undo. A handful of commuters made quick, unguided choices and lived because of them. A man who ducked into a staff corridor and found a stair, two friends who dropped low and breathed through damp scarves until a torch found them. A woman who avoided the nearest exit because it looked crowded and instead took a longer route that stayed clear. Others were unlucky by inches. Several collapsed within sight of doors. The toxic mix from burning varnish, grease, plastics, and paint overwhelmed lungs long before flame ever touched skin. Appliances kept arriving, more pumps, more ladders, more officers to carve the chaos into sectors. Buses were commandeered as warming points. Hospitals stood by for burns and smoke inhalation. News crews filmed the yellow light beating against low cloud. Over the radios, clipped voices called for ventilation, for more water, for relief crews. In those moments, the city seemed to hold its breath with the station. By midnight, the worst of the fire was out. The ticket hall looked like a room raked by a storm, ceiling blackened and sagging, escalator charred to a spine, puddles shining in the heat. 31 people were dead. More than 100 were injured. Families worked telephones from kitchens and bedsides, calling hospitals, then police stations, then morgues. A firefighter's helmet lay on the floor where it had been kicked aside. On one wall, smoke had painted a tide mark as clear as a ruler line. The inquiry that followed asked hard questions about habits. Underground staff admitted that small escalator fires were familiar and usually handled with a broom, a bucket, and patience. Smoking had been banned in parts of the system, yet the reflex lingered, and a dropped match or cigarette could still find its way through the treads into the perfect food: lint, paper, and grease. Radios did not always talk to one another. Some fire doors had been wedged for convenience. Above all, few people had imagined how violently a fire could accelerate up a wooden incline. Change followed quickly and, for once, stayed. Wooden escalators were ripped out and replaced with metal. Sprinklers and heat detectors watched the hard-to-reach spaces. Deep cleaning schedules stripped grease from every moving void. Staff were retrained to evacuate early and treat any smoke as an alarm, not an inconvenience. Radios were upgraded. Control rooms learned to seize command. Signage and lighting were redesigned so that, in smoke, a stranger could still find a way out. A strict, system-wide ban on smoking took hold and was enforced. For the families, the reforms did not cancel absence. Names carved into stone after the fire do not describe the lives they marked. Commuters who left dinner cooling on a plate. A worker who stayed at his post too long. A rescuer who made one more turn in the smoke. Survivors speak of the smell of varnish years later when toast catches in a kitchen. Small fires are never small to them again. King's Cross returned to bustle, rebuilt and bright, its boards full of times and platforms, its tunnels widened and scrubbed. People hurry through with coffee cups and backpacks, thinking of schedules and messages on their phones. Escalators hum. Few pause to look up at the vents or the ceiling where the heat once rolled. But safety is a living verb, not a plaque, and the station's ordinary day remains the best memorial. Alarms that work, staff who move early, air that clears, doors that do not stay wedged. Stand at the top of a modern escalator and feel the lift of warm air on your face. Imagine that air catching fire and racing toward you faster than a person can run. Think of the 20 minutes in which a small, familiar nuisance became a disaster that reshaped a city's rules. The line from a dropped match to a national overhaul runs through this hall. We build systems to carry millions. We keep them safe by refusing to ignore the first thin ribbon of smoke. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.